Broadway contributes $40 billion to the New York City economy every single year, and yet, most Broadway shows don't make their money back. So who actually is making money on Broadway? Let's talk about it. Friends, if you're new here, my name is Katharine Quinn. I am a 30-something living in New York City and working on Broadway. Last year, I assisted the writing teams of Shucked and How to Dance in Ohio. This year, I ran social media for The Roommate. I'm currently running social media for The Great Gatsby on Broadway. Wrapped up Spells of the Sea at the Kennedy Center. Currently running Hip Hop Nutcracker on tours, socials, and there are many more projects in the mix, truly all the time. Today, we're going to talk about some of the nitty-gritty numbers that people don't often discuss in the industry. There was a piece that came out in the Broadway Journal, which anyone can subscribe to the Broadway Journal. Highly recommend. It's very, very industry tea, but it was breaking down some of the numbers of folks who are making money in the industry. And so I was like, we're going to talk about this.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so before we dive in, I want us to get a sense of the state of the industry. So obviously, we're still recovering post-shutdown. During shutdown, Broadway was at a loss of $35 million a week. There's a lot of money that needs to be recouped from that time. Even prior to that time, individual shows mostly were not successful. And we have about 20% fewer audiences than we had pre-pandemic. So there is a lot that we need to make up for. While attendance is about 15 to 20% down, marketing costs have increased by roughly 30%. Labor costs are also up significantly, and insurance premiums have doubled or tripled. If you speak to anyone in the industry, most likely they're aware the house is on fire. Broadway is having a rough moment. But that isn't true of everyone. Numbers that were recently disclosed about Jujamps in theater tell a very different story. $116 million in revenue, $34 million in profit. That is a nearly 30% profit margin at a time when almost nothing in the Broadway industry is actually making money. Everyone is scrambling. They are outperforming nearly every sector of the US stock market, and their profitability sustained despite the rest of the industry struggling. There is much to unpack here. So in case you aren't aware, every Broadway show rents a Broadway theater from a theater landlord, and most theaters are run by Jujamson, ATG, the Schuberts, and Nederlander. Everyone likes to point fingers at other people in the industry when people are like, this is why it's falling apart. You are the most expensive.
They point their fingers a lot.
In a production, a lot of the time, fingers will get pointed at maybe the director during rehearsals, but the producer more likely. But producers might be pointing fingers at, well, they could point their fingers at any number of things, but quite possibly the costs to rent this space. Broadway is a real estate game, and the landlords are clearly the ones making the money. Let's examine the underlying business model, the theater economics, if you will. So first, we're going to talk about some of the revenue streams for theaters and theater owners. First of all, there is a fixed base rent regardless of the show performance. I'm going to save my commentary until we get through a couple of these facts. We're going to get through the facts and then I'm going to share some thoughts about it. Great, so fixed base rent. Percentage of gross ticket sales, approximately 7%, facility fees, and then a concessions revenue share. Also, ticketing fees, because the theater owners often own the ticketing platform where you are purchasing your ticket and paying fees into that. So they're in kind of every single piece of the pie. It's a brilliant business model. It's like the only brilliant business model on Broadway, but to the detriment of shows that are already enormously expensive. First, it should be said, I am a capitalist and I appreciate the business acumen of these theater owners. I don't think they are bad people. I do think it's right to question the oligarchy, the concentration of power, the profits when everyone else is struggling quite so much. Theater owners are not incentivized to keep shows in their theaters. And I kind of fundamentally think that's a bit of a problem. People have a lot of different thoughts about this, and I'm actually really curious to hear what you think, so please leave a comment down below. But we have an extraordinarily high churn rate of shows right now. And listen, dating back to ye olde times, there were shows that would run on Broadway for 10 days or one night or whatever. It happens. It has always happened. Something I worry about a lot with our current landscape is, and I think this is partially a marketing issue and partially because financially there's no way for the middleman or the mid-sized shows to succeed. The only kinds of shows that seem to be making money right now, or at least even recouping their money, are teensy-tiny shows like Gutenberg with 2 names, or a mega musical that's like got glitz, stunt casting, and can run. The shows that are really struggling right now in the Broadway landscape are the mid-size show. The exceptions to that are recently The Outsiders and also Hadestown. Those are kind of the two that I can think of that bucked the norm and stuck around. Shucked Forever for me is one that's like, our grosses were really solid, but Tommy came in anyway. And now Tommy is gone and Redwood's coming in anyway. And it's like Darwinian, but also, sorry, y'all are watching me think in real time. Broadway marketing often relies on word of mouth, which is kind of insane. Social media is now word of mouth, and more people need to get hip to that and bring in social media earlier and alter budgets and all of that jazz. Regardless, marketing people and the industry at large seem to think that word of mouth in New York is still like the thing that we need. I think it is a big asset, but I think that other things, social media has become our word of mouth. And that could begin well before a show is actually performing. That's another soapbox. If the thought was for Shucked, we just need word of mouth to pick up, but the show doesn't run long, like the theater owners are not incentivized to keep Shucked in the space. And for what it's worth, yeah, this is all separate. I was a writing assistant, okay? So this was all well beyond my purview in the show. But theater owners are not incentivized to keep shows in the space. The show, arguably, did not have enough time to build a mass of word of mouth. People in New York might have known what Shucked was, but people beyond New York didn't know what Shucked was. It left. It was less than a year, and it was gone.
Goodbye. Say goodbye.
Anyway, as we talk about the theater owners making this kind of money, it's tricky because Broadway is commercial theater. Broadway is not a nonprofit. Broadway does not uphold itself to a mission. It doesn't have to. It's not a nonprofit. And every part of the industry is operating as a little capitalistic enterprise. But also, I do wish we had a little bit more of a collective mindset. It's a pipe dream. I know. Egos, pride, money, razzmatazz, showbiz. Anyway, okay, we're gonna get back to our notes and then I have to feed my dog. Okay, so we're going back to the numbers. Number 2, cost structure. In case you are not aware, when you are renting a Broadway theater, what do you get? Do you get toilet paper? Do you get paper towels? Do you get lights? No, you sure don't. You sure do not. You get the 4 walls that you are renting. You are highly suggested to use their preferred concessions people per theater. Their front of house. But you are paying for the toilet paper. You are paying for the paper towels. You are still paying for the cost of those concessions, employees, and the product. But they are going to get a piece of the pie and they're going to suggest who you use. Kind of a racket. And obviously the show is covering marketing expenses as well. Owners are responsible for building maintenance, property taxes, and long-term capital improvements, which, if you've been in one of the 41 Broadway theaters, you tell me how many of those have recently been renovated. Risk distribution. So we've talked about some of the numbers, now we're going to talk about risk. Producers and investors absorb most of the risk. The theater owners, there's always someone waiting in the wings. Theater owners receive steady revenue regardless of the show's performance. They're going to get their weekly rent regardless. This model has become particularly apparent, and it's become apparent how, I think producers have always been aware that it's a bit of a racket, but I think it has become a little painful in the post-shutdown years where everyone is just lucky to get their show up at all, let alone hope that it'll be a success. In case you are not aware, Jew Jamson was recently acquired by ATG for $604 million. Okay, so what does this acquisition tell us, other than those 5 theaters are now under the ATG umbrella? We get a tentative sense of what the valuation of a Broadway theater might be. In this instance, if we break it down, $121 million per theater. As I talked about in the beginning, there are now 3 owners who pretty much control all of the theaters. By the numbers, that is, the Schubert organization has 17 theaters, Nederlander has 9 theaters, and ATG now has 7. So what are the implications of all these numbers? First of all, in the post-shutdown years, we have higher production costs, which means higher ticket prices. There is obviously increased pressure for commercial success, which often leads to less artistic risk. If you are frustrated by the Disneyfication of Broadway or the commercialization of Broadway, even though it was always a commercial enterprise, but it becoming a little more Vegas-y and a little more glitz and glam, this is largely why we are not in a position to take a lot of risk. There is so much money on the line. People want IP, they want those star names, they need them. And as I said, the theater owners are not incentivized to support the smaller show in particular. They just want to make money. And you can't really fault them because it's a business. While we are taking a look at these numbers, just like a quick recap, the average Broadway show right now is somewhere between a capitalization of 15 to, I have heard as recently as high as $30 million. Typical weekly running costs are somewhere between $700,000 and just north of $1 million a week. 1 in 5 shows recoup, but those theater owners are always going to be seeing profits. I think I'm in the wrong side of this business. I would love to know what you think about all of this. Does Broadway have any sort of responsibility to operate in a more altruistic way? Or do in particular theater owners owe anything to the shows that are renting their spaces for the betterment of the industry as a whole? I actually don't know the answer to this. I think the Broadway lover in me wishes that that were more of a thing, but I also appreciate that Broadway is a dinosaur of an industry and she operates the way she operates, and respectfully, it's America and nobody's going to want to part with their hard-earned cash. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what the solution is, but I do know there's a disparity between, I don't want to just say the haves and the have-nots, but those who are consistently making money regardless of performance, and then the artists in those spaces who struggle and then are out of work. Again, I'm not meaning for this to be any sort of takedown of theater owners, just a questioning maybe of the way we've always operated. Anyway, let me know what you think. As always, I invite you to follow me on Instagram and TikTok @ Katharine Quinn. Thank you so much for watching this video. This dog, who you cannot see me scritching, demands dinner, so I'm gonna go feed him. And I'll see you in the comment section. I'm excited about that. All right, bye.